Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take stacks of really detailed research, the kind of stuff that usually stays in academic journals or police reports, and we pull out the most important insights for you.
And today we are tackling an incredibly sensitive and, frankly, complex topic.
We're looking at the organization of child sexual exploitation networks.
This is such a vital conversation. I mean, you see it everywhere in the media and even from government bodies. These networks, especially on the dark web, they're almost always called organized crime.
Right, sophisticated, high-tech OC operations.
And look, the crime is horrific. The technical skill to hide it is, undeniable.
Exactly. And when we hear organized crime, our minds immediately go to what? The Godfather. We picture these hierarchies, financial motives, protection rackets.
Sure.
But our mission today is to look right underneath that label. We're using some incredibly detailed sources. Dutch police investigations into dark web forums, UK police studies using social network analysis.
Real on-the-ground data.
Yeah, to figure out how organized these networks actually are and, in what ways they function, both online and in local communities.
We really want to get past the serious nature of the crime itself and just look at the actual mechanics of the organization.
Okay, so let's unpack this right away. The sources throw up a huge challenge from the get-go. They say we have to be really careful about defining this as organized crime just because a crime itself is so serious.
That's the critical distinction for both academics and for law enforcement strategy. If you just slap the organized crime label on a group because what they do is terrible, you actually obscure how they really operate.
And then you don't know how to disrupt them effectively.
Precisely. So the question isn't, is this organized crime? That's too simple.
So we need to reframe it.
We have to ask, to what extent and in what ways is this crime organized? Is it about money? Is it about protecting members? Or is it something else entirely? A social thing?
Okay, so to answer that, the analysis gives us a framework, 3 basic structural types to classify what's going on.
Right, a way to sort the motives.
So tell us of the first one.
The first type is the one we all think of. It's the entrepreneurial structure. These are, geared purely toward making money. A drug cartel, a counterfeiting ring.
A criminal market. Profit is the goal.
Exactly. Everything is optimized for profit.
Okay, that makes sense. Financial motive. What's the second type?
The second is what's called an illegal governance structure. Now, these don't necessarily generate the profit themselves, but they exist to protect the criminals from, say, getting ripped off or from competition.
Wait, illegal governance, so that's like the mafia demanding protection money or gangs fighting over territory?
In a way, yeah. They sort of mirror what governments do in legal markets. They manage disputes, enforce rules. If the CSE market on the dark web was all about profit, you'd expect to see these really powerful governance structures.
But we don't?
Well, as we'll see, because money often isn't the primary goal, that structure is much, much weaker than in typical OC.
Okay, so we have profit-driven and protection-driven structures, and that brings us to the third type, which it sounds like is the most important one here.
It really is. It's the associational structure. This is purely psychological. It's social. It exists to fulfill offenders' social needs. It provides bonding, mutual aid, and an environment where these, horrific interests are seen as normal.
That is a completely different reason to organize. It's not about money, it's about a feeling of belonging.
A very warped sense of belonging, yes.
So with a CSE network, we're likely to see a really strong associational structure, maybe a few other elements mixed in, but not that complex top-down governance.
That's a perfect way to put it. And this framework lets us look at the data without just, falling back on those old assumptions.
Okay, let's pivot to what the sources say about real-world localized networks, the kind operating in a community. The police used social network analysis, SNA, which is a really powerful tool.
It is. It maps out all the connections, who's talking to whom, who the real influencers are.
So what did it show? What's the internal structure like?
The findings, they consistently smash that stereotype of a sophisticated syndicate. When you actually map it out, these community-based networks are, as a rule, loosely connected.
Loosely connected.
Yeah, they lack sophistication, and most importantly, they lack hierarchy. One of the papers called them a far cry from the highly structured and hierarchical models we all assume.
Wait, that's kind of shocking. If the crime is so sustained, but the group is decentralized, then who's running things? Where's the center of power?
The data suggests there often isn't one. There's no godfather figure pulling all the strings. Instead, the connections are strong because they're embedded in just normal social ties.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, relationships that were there before any of the exploitation started. We're talking about family members, friends, work colleagues, romantic partners.
Wow. So if law enforcement takes out one person, they're not just hitting a criminal, they're hitting a whole family or a friendship circle.
That's exactly why they're so resilient. The bonds are based on shared life, not just shared crime. The foundation isn't a criminal org chart, it's an existing social fabric.
That makes them so hard to isolate.
And here's another layer that makes it so difficult. The victims themselves often came from interconnected peer groups. They knew each other before, through their own family and social ties.
So the network is almost primed for exploitation because everyone already knows each other, offenders and victims alike.
Exactly. And sometimes new bonds even formed between victims during the exploitation, which, just solidifies that structure even more, even if it's unintentional.
This has huge implications for police strategy, doesn't it? If there are no powerful ringleaders, what does that say about trying to dismantle them with high-profile arrests?
It suggests that targeting a supposed ringleader is often pretty ineffectual. When the organization is decentralized and runs on these deep social bonds, you take one person out, the system it reforms, it grows around the whole.
Like a hydra. You cut off one head, but the body is fine because it was never top down to begin with.
A good analogy. The data really points to the need to target how these crimes are embedded with other crimes. For example, a lot of these local groups were also involved in drug supply.
Ah, so you go after the financial side that is there, even if it's not the main point of the CSE activity itself.
It might be a more effective route than trying to find some mythical mastermind who probably doesn't exist.
Let's shift gears completely. Let's go to the dark web. This is where you see the high-tech sophistication that leads to that organized crime label.
Yeah.
How does the structure change when you go from a local group to an anonymous global forum?
Well, the digital world runs on what the sources call the AAA engine: anonymity, accessibility, and affordability.
Right.
Software like Tor gives users near complete anonymity. And that security is what allows these groups to organize globally without, immediate fear of being caught.
And the scale is just massive.
It's staggering. So, get this. Only about 2% of hidden services on Tor are CSE related.
So 98% is other stuff.
Right. But of all the traffic on Tor, approximately 80% is directed specifically to those CSE sites.
80% of all traffic is going to just 2% of the sites. That concentration is, wow. It speaks volumes about the demand. It's like a magnet.
A huge magnet for this kind of activity. But here's the big structural twist. These dark web forums are fundamentally different from other criminal markets, like for guns or drugs.
How so?
The defining feature is the almost total absence of direct financial motives.
So it's not a crime for profit in the way we normally think. So if money isn't the currency, what is?
The profit is twofold. First, getting access to new or unique material. And second, just as important, it's about acquiring status and reputation within the forum.
It's about social standing, not wealth.
Right, and that completely changes the organizational needs. You don't need money launderers or violent enforcers if you're just trading files for reputation.
In a weird way, it simplifies things for them. They don't have to worry about fraud or competitors in the same way because they're all sort of working towards the same goal.
It mitigates a lot of the classic problems criminal markets face. It's essentially a status-driven barter system.
But I'm stuck on this. How do you build trust in a place that's designed for total anonymity? That seems like a massive contradiction. You have to trust the person you're trading with.
It's the central problem they have to solve. And trust is built over time. You demonstrate you're reliable, you're legitimate. This goes right back to that associational structure.
How do you prove you're legitimate?
New users often have to provide evidence. Sometimes they have to compromise themselves. They have to share material to prove they're not law enforcement to get accepted.
You have an initiation right to prove you're one of them.
Yes. And the imagery itself becomes both the commodity and the currency. Sharing it allows you to build social cohesion, build that reputation. The more unique stuff you share, the higher your status, and the deeper you get into the network.
So let's talk about the specific roles people play. Even without a formal hierarchy, there must be different functions. What are the key roles online versus offline?
Online, you can basically break it down into 3 levels of activity. You have the lurkers, which is the vast majority. They just download and view material.
Okay.
Then you have the moderately active members. Their posts are all about exchanging material. And finally, you get the significantly active members. These are the organizers, the developers, sometimes with formal titles like administrator or moderator.
And those roles must require some serious technical skills.
They do. They often attract people with professional IT backgrounds. And that technical skill is often what confuses people into thinking the entire structure is this sophisticated hierarchy.
They mistake technical ability for organizational structure.
Exactly.
What about in the local physical networks, the ones that rely on social connections, not tech skills?
There, the roles are based on what they facilitate. The most critical roles were found to be the hosts, the people providing a physical location for abuse, and the recruiters, the ones who introduce new victims.
Why are those specific roles so critical?
Because the social network analysis showed they had much higher centrality scores. That means they were the key connectors. They were the brokers, linking abusers to other abusers and victims to abusers.
So the most damaging person isn't the mastermind, it's the person who provides a living room or knows another vulnerable kid. That's chilling.
It's jarring,
Yeah.
but it brings us right back to that core associational element, the deep psychological drivers behind all this.
Right. If it's not about profit or power in the traditional sense, what is the engine that keeps these communities running?
It's all about meeting these deep-seated, non-criminal psychological needs. For people who often feel totally marginalized or isolated from society, these groups provide a really powerful sense of belonging.
And a positive self-image, however warped it is.
A very warped but positive self-image. They create an us versus them world, a subcultural identity, and they do it by justifying their actions, often by condemning the condemners, attacking law enforcement, the media, society as a whole.
And within their bubble, their behavior becomes normalized.
Absolutely. And these communities act as a primer for offending. It's not just about sharing files.
What do you mean by a primer?
They provide mutual aid and advice on everything. Technical advice on how to stay safe, how to evade police, but also psychological advice. Techniques for approaching children, both online and off. They lower the mental barrier to committing contact offenses.
And I imagine they share and reinforce the same justifications to keep that sense of belonging intact.
Constantly. You hear the same things, it's just pictures. Or they see the children as not real, or already sexualized, which is easier to do when you're anonymous online. Some even claim the material is a safe outlet or a form of therapy to stop them from committing contact offenses.
So the community validates and encourages these destructive beliefs.
It creates a perfect echo chamber where their desires are accepted.
So if we pull all of this together, the key takeaway from the sources is that these CSE networks, they are not the monolithic mob-style criminal empires we imagine.
Far from it. They're defined by fluidity, by a loose structure. They rely on either deep, existing social ties offline, or on technical anonymity and a kind of status-driven barter system online.
And they keep going primarily because they're meeting the deep psychological and social needs of marginalized people, not because of some complex financial hierarchies.
That's the core of it. And understanding that is absolutely vital for actually disrupting them.
It suggests that law enforcement needs to focus less on finding a kingpin who might not even exist, and more on the network's embeddedness in other crimes, like drug supply.
Or targeting the connective tissue. Those hosts and recruiters with the high centrality scores. If you can break those links,
You have a much better chance of fracturing the whole system.
a much better chance.
Which leaves us with a final and I think a really provocative thought for you to consider. Our sources make it crystal clear that these networks provide powerful psychological rewards, belonging, validation, acceptance to people who often feel deeply isolated.
They're filling a void.
Exactly. So if these destructive criminal networks are thriving because they offer a warped sense of community to marginalized individuals, what preventative, real-world social structures, community programs, mental health support, targeted outreach are we missing that could address that core human need for belonging before it gets twisted and fuels criminality? Something to chew on long after this deep dive ends.